tat. Words can build or words can break. Speak the truth for all our sake. A hand that feeds can also bind, but peace can free a restless mind. Fix the cracks, don't paint them bright. The world's not whole without the fight. So rise and speak, don't just comply. Change the script, don't live the lie. Counter this, counter that.
Well, a while ago, I felt like I should have clicked the record button. It's like we were just going and going, and I was like, well, I guess we'll just start it now. But
Hey
I mean,
man, if at any point we're in the heat of a conversation or something like that, just go ahead and slide over, click that record button, and let's. I'm acting like I'm on 24/7, bro. Let's go.
well, and I mean, we kind of just started off. We start shows off like that, whereas like
Mhm.
before we've even clicked record, we're like talking, and I should probably just click the record button from the get go.
Yeah, and then just at the beginning, just be like, "This was a recorded conversation,"
Yep.
and yeah, and this is, and then the title is just what we happen to talk about that day.
Which I mean, honestly, I feel like could make some great episodes. Especially how, like, I don't know how, but we started off with like a liberalism. We talked about Rome and China, and then we got to like or race topics and classism, and it's like it just flows. Yep.
Hitting everything, hitting everything.
Hmm?
Why? Well, because we're talking about human beings, human behavior,
Mhm.
human growth, thought progress over the years, different systems, different identities, different classes. It's an interesting world,
Mhm.
and it kind of leads to it plays into the geopolitics discussion that we were going to go over. So, I mean, it all bleeds into each other, very
Oh,
much so.
definitely. And honestly, just to kind of highlight what some of the people missed in the prior discussion, we kind of started this conversation out with liberalism, and we have some differing opinions about liberalism. And David, I mean, we both acknowledge that your current traditional mean of the definition of liberalism, when you're talking about the French Revolution, was the first time that we had really had a definition for a government that should be protecting its citizens, its right to life, its right to self-autonomy, and the right to have a say in how it was governed.
And equality under that law,
Yes.
not sh-
And
not not law based class.
mhm. And I had kind of highlighted that even though that this is your traditional uh, definition of liberalism, I kind of say that the liberalism started a long time ago. That history has forever been in the flux of a move towards what was defined 300 years ago. And even
Yes.
though, yeah, which I mean, we both kind of agree on, but like, if we're going to take the definition of liberalism and apply it to certain points in history, that's kind of where we kind of differ on things. Because I feel like you can apply some of the definition in the sense of, if you're talking about liberalism meaning more freedoms, which is what I would kind of define liberalism as is a movement towards more freedoms, as opposed to the actual definition of saying, well, liberalism is this. I kind of look at it as a movement towards more freedom over time throughout history.
In a way, I mean, I'm not saying that that's not the case. I'm just saying that flour is on the trajectory of becoming bread, but that doesn't mean it always becomes bread. It requires different types of ingredients to go with it. And without those ingredients, bread does not become bread. It becomes something else.
Beer.
And it could become beer, it could become cake, it could become a whole bunch of different things, but it's not bread. So my overarching point was that unless it has those core principles, it is not liberalism. It is not the bread, because it has to have certain ingredients in order for it to be what liberalism is. Capital L, liberalism. Not the liberalization of people, not anything like that, not liberal behavior, but a structure, a set of principles that equal protection under the law, individual rights, right to liberty, all of that stuff is a specific ideology. And you can have different branches coming off of that. And that doesn't mean that liberalism wasn't picked off, didn't take ideas from ancient Roman society or anything like that. It's just to say that you can have all these things coming up to a certain point, and then you hit that point. It's like, okay, this is what this is. John Locke was like, these are my core principles of liberalism, and what that is. Go from there. And that's all I was saying. It's like we're agreeing that it's this pretty much kind of the same thing, but I'm saying that I'm taking that chunk right there and saying, okay, this is what liberalism is, and then everything else just kind of is within that realm. So, and like a liberalization of people is one thing. Liberalism is its own thing. So you can liberalize a people within liberalism, or you can do the opposite. So I don't know.
AKA the China discussion.
Yeah, and that's why I asked about China. You know, whether or not you consider China liberal, because I would say that they can have some liberal values, but that doesn't mean that they fall within a liberal within liberalism, within that kind of actual system of governing. I mean, and it's also, it's free market too. It's also what it is, and ultimately it's traditionally right wing, and we all know China ain't really right wing.
No. But like, also that's why I kind of acknowledge though that liberalism, while it might have its definition, that liberalism itself is a movement towards that said thing, towards the ultimate end goal, which was the like egalitarianism under the law for all citizens, the right to life, the right to property, things like this. But you have to have a process from the point where it's like, hey, Mr. non-land owning white man, you don't get a say, to, even though you are a brown person of color, that, whatever, that lives within the, or a woman of color that lives within the society that before didn't have the right to vote, now has the right to vote. That was a process of liberalization.
As a descriptive, not claim, but to describe what you're talking about, I think I would say it's Republican liberalism, if that makes sense, which is kind of what our country was basically founded on, because it's not just, you're just free to do whatever. You also have your duties to the state as well. And with the republic, that's the republicanism
Yeah.
aspect of it. Maybe even like civic liberalism.
So like,
um,
how would you define a duty?
a duty?
Nah.
That's a good question. Um, honestly, I don't know. Some type of civic duty. I don't know. How would you define it? And I'll see if I
Um.
agree.
Well, I think Andrew
Like
Wilson.
service to military would be considered a duty, but that is something that not everybody is required to do. You are, well, yeah, you are required to sign up for a draft, right? If you are of voting age,
Hmm.
you don't have to vote. If you do vote, you are required to show up for jury duty. So it's taken part of the legal process. I do agree with that. I think you should be part of that whole process. So that's one example of a duty, is basically court duty. So, which I think is the only thing mandated that you do if you are a registered voter. So,
Yeah. Well, it's like I
and
think
taxes.
which is like that's where Andrew Wilson's definition really comes into play, and I think it highlights it really well. Whereas it's like rights are what is granted to you, and then your duty is your privilege absent a right. So you don't have the right to go serve in the military. You have a duty to go serve in the military when your country is under attack.
But who's why should you be forced into that duty?
So that kind of gets into the psychology of things. Whereas it's
Mhm.
like, if I believe that my culture is better than another culture, or I believe my government and the way of governance in my country is better than other governance of other countries, or the country that's trying to attack me, then I would say that I have a duty to sacrifice my life in protection of what I hold ideal in society. The way that Romans believed that their society was better than all other societies at that time and felt the need to go spread that. Yes, it's by force, but if you kind of look at most of history and even today, like most things are force. Force doctrine is very, very applicable to most actions of a government. And you can kind of try to prescribe morality to that, but that's where I think things kind of fall short. Like, just because you have force and the ability to wield force does not automatically make you right. So
Right.
it's the discussion we had before, whereas like, so might makes, but might does not make right.
Right.
And if
So I
you,
mean, then
I
we get
I
more
feel America,
philosophical with it.
yeah, but I feel America, as America exists and as it has progressed in some aspects, you know, uh, has that duty to uphold its core tenets with might. And whether that is right from our perspective or wrong from someone else's perspective isn't really the question. It's whether over the long term this comes out to be the better play. You kind of have to, some things kind of have to be devoid of some morality, uh, which is, kind of a hard look, whereas in was Genghis Khan, when he took over all of Asia and most of and made his way into Europe, was this morally right? Not necessarily, but was it unifying? Highly. Did it have its core tenets that launched Asia into a completely different society than it had ever been before? Did it found a big part of the core identity of what Asia has become? Yes. Does that make it morally right or morally wrong? I would say neither.
I understand. I just wonder, um, what is the threshold for individual rights? Is that just bound by society, by how whatever society views rights at the time?
I
And
mean,
does
right.
it when does it stop becoming liberalism?
So, I mean, I feel like you can have liberalism without having full rights for everyone. Because, like, just because I don't have a say in how my society is run doesn't mean that my society doesn't protect my right to eventually own land and my right to freedom and all of that, even though I have zero say in it. I can still be treated equal, even as a non landowner and all of that, and not have a say. Whereas, like, all of this kind of like depends on how far you want to take egalitarianism. But these things aren't mutually exclusive to each other. And that's where I really feel like we've come up against a wall, because you are granted these certain things by our society, but you are owed absolutely nothing to that society that has provided you all of these freedoms, that has provided you the right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, land ownership, the freedom to speak whatever you want to speak, whether it be on the internet, the most terrible thing you could possibly imagine. Like, say, Nick Fuentes wants to
Don't
make
say
it
it. Don't say
wants
it.
to make
Oh,
the
okay.
absolute craziest joke about like a historical figure that existed in the 40s, or say someone wants to be like, fuck Donald Trump. Both of these things are seen as equally protected.
Yeah.
And I would say that that society that is willing to equally protect both people under the law is owed a certain kind of duty if it wants to continue to prosper and exist.
But what? Okay, so then let's. Okay, so what duties are owed to that society
Um,
in your view?
the protection of that society, meaning the taking up of arms to either protect that society or further that society where is necessary to keep it alive. Say something like a situation like we saw in Venezuela, whereas it's not necessarily moral or immoral, but if we allow the other action to progress far enough, could be of detriment to our liberal society.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to prescribe morality to that action, which is where I think a lot of people kind of, fluster.
Right. Yes. It's. I mean, this is going to be a little bit of an aside, but it's like because you did bring up Venezuela, so, but it's like it's like the torpedoing of that Iranian warship that was coming back from a military exercise in India that involved 74 other countries, or 74 countries, and it was on its way back home. It was 2 or 3 days on its journey back to Iran, and the U.S. military torpedoed it, and sank it, and also didn't do anything to rescue the survivors. Now, granted, it's a submarine. What are you going to do with a submarine as far as helping people? They sent out a distress signal. Sri Lanka came in and helped. You know, it is what it is. But the thing is that, the optics look terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure. But what a lot of people don't understand about wartime rules is that wartime rules means you're going to have some bad optics. Uh, the U.S. military is completely within its military right to shoot that ship, because the U.S. military is in an active conflict, an active war with Iran. So that made the naval vessel 100% a legitimate
Open
target.
target. Yeah.
A legitimate target, not just open, but a legitimate wartime target. And so, and not helping the people, like, that's just situational. It's like, I mean, like I said, what are you going to do? The people that did survive, they got help. But it is what it is. In order to complete the mission that the U.S. has set out, part of that mission was destroying the entire Iranian naval fleet. That warship is part of the Iranian fleet. And so it's not about, like you're saying, it's not about right versus wrong in a moral sense. It's about, does this further, because we're talking about geopolitics, and it's complicated, it's complex, and it's dirty, it's ugly, and might makes, as you say. And so militaries, nation states don't have to act on the same moral ground as individuals, as we have discussed. And so if you, I mean, you could say, well, they started the war, we started the war. I mean, it doesn't matter. You're in the middle of a war. The rules are the rules. You can do what you can. You can really, there's a lot of things that people just like, it's just like, well, I mean, you shouldn't do that. It's like, well, it's war, man. Like, I don't know what you want me to tell you.
No.
But yeah, to your point, there's no right, there's no wrong. It just is what it is, and it's to the betterment and towards the future of our society and the way that we view things. And so, it is what it is, and I don't think there's anything that you or I can do about it.
And I think, like, I think the complaints are valid. Whereas, like, this looks terrible. And if you want to take every situation on its face value, and you kind of want to, break apart the morality of every single instance, sure, you can do that. But at the end of it, where it's like, okay, well, that progressed to this, which allowed us to do this, which allowed us to do that. And it's like, it muddies the waters a bit. Whereas, like, yes, every loss of human life sucks. It is an absolute terrible thing. But when you're talking about the furtherance of a system that we highly believe in, we have set up these rules to kind of have a more moral war, that things that, got put in place because of immoral actions in war. So it's not like that these actions will always be acceptable, or that they're always going to be the just action. It's more so in the furtherance of the goal. And I think most people will kind of have some problems setting aside that and looking at it as, is this the furtherance of a just cause, or is it not in the furtherance of a just cause? And I think a lot of Americans take for granted the freedoms that they've been given that most of the world doesn't have. Most of the world doesn't have freedom for women. Half of the world has women enslaved, basically. And to say that we as an America, like, yeah, people died, but are we necessarily the bad person in this? Well, I would say that if you want to further our ideals of egalitarianism, that that there's always going to be some death in the journey. And I think that part is hard for some people to stomach. We didn't get to America without deaths along the way. People had to die for America to have the just and free society that it has. People had to die for people to be seen as equal under the law, no matter what color your skin was. People had to die for it to be seen that men and women are equal under the law and should be allowed all of these same rights and liberties. And
Oh,
I think
you
that's
done?
hard. I think that's hard for people to stomach sometimes, especially when it's happening in the current situation. It's easier to look at it as historically this is what happened, but like now we're above that. Are we though?
And that's the question is, it's like, that's a question for a lot of people anyway, is like, what kind of, what are we saying about our own values if we're just blowing up ships and not trying to help save the people?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of values are we actually upholding if that's something that we are doing? Which I think is a fair critique. But I also think I think it's in competition with reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, are the core principles still there? That's kind of my overarching point, my overarching theme is, are the core principles still there? And are they the principles that we are trying to uphold?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say yes, because, yes, in some sense, we are trying to corner a market, even though liberal ideas means free market. And so, but the thing is, do you have a free market when one of the players is selling a very important resource, oil, and gas, under market value?
To
And so,
our biggest competitor in the world,
to
who is
not just,
who's
but that
fighting
goes completely
against our ideals.
exactly, exactly. And that's the thing. It's like liberal ideals is free market, and you are there undercutting the free market. Whether or not we're the biggest player in that market, I think it's kind of a side point.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not our goal to corner the market is also, I mean, that's competition. That's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But to undercut the market, it's not legitimate competition when you're doing that. And I guess they would say, well, you're not, you don't have legitimate competition when you have bases all around Iran, and surrounding states. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that's. I mean, I know we came in and we bombed Iraq, and we invaded Afghanistan and all that stuff. And I mean, what do we say to that? I mean,
But that also
so,
allowed for the free flow of oil and natural gas into Europe, who had been restricted from these things because a pipeline wasn't being built, which also benefited the people in those countries before you had the ultimate regime that came in and was like, "Yep, nope, this is ours again." So it's like we tried to further some of our ideals. Was it all, above board? Was it all fully moral? Was there some like that's a different discussion,
mm,
Whereas they try to entangle both of these discussions into one instance, and
yeah,
I
well,
don't think they are.
you could be an objective observer of history and
Mhm,
current actions that are going on, and then you can have a completely different conversation about what's moral about everything in between.
mhm,
So yeah, just saying like this is just reality. This is how nation states progress. This is how nation states compete and gain power. This is power dynamics at its core. It's
mhm.
just and intelligence. I mean, it's kind of who had the best plan before everything popped off,
Oh yeah.
and who
Well,
has the best follow up contingency plans for after.
and I think you brought up a point that you kind of skipped over half of the fact, whereas like you're talking about a free market with liberalization, and
Mhm.
we're trying to kind of open a free market in some of the ways, but Iran was selling to someone that doesn't have a free market. The free market doesn't exist in China. You're
That's kind
allowed
of
to
the point.
open
Yeah.
you're allowed to open a business, but once you get to a certain size, the the state of China gives you a CCP handler that dictates how your business will operate, so that it is in furtherance with the continued flourishing of the Chinese way of life. Where it's partially free market, but it's also a distribution system that only allows for the continuance of the free market as long as it's not at the detriment of the whole Chinese plan.
Right. Ironically, centralizing stuff is at the detriment of the whole Chinese plan.
Hmm.
So it's just because you're creating it. You know, that's a problem with nationalizing like industries. Venezuela is nothing without its oil industry because they nationalized it. Like as soon as you break that, the rest of it collapses. And honestly, I mean that's really oil and anything. I don't know if oil is the best example, but when you nationalize oil itself, you can kind of when that's like your staple. Um, yeah, I don't know. Because oil is just it is the commodity. Like
For now.
it gets shipping is done on oil, so everything gets everywhere because of oil.
Hmm.
And that's not just boats, that's plane, trains, all of it, and that goes down the line. You know, the cost of everything. It's almost all from oil, and that's why
Most
that's
of
why
most of your products too. I mean, you got shoes, that's oil. You got
anything
rubber.
with rubber,
You've
anything with rubber,
anything with plastic. Like, so, hey,
paint,
look, you've got something that's got an oil product on it right there. Like that
yep.
wrapper, oil, and that's one thing I don't think a lot of people really realize is like a lot of medicines are produced with like they have oil-based products in them. And for now, that will continue to be the way until we find some sort of other alternative means of energy that is extremely energy dense, which I mean the US is kind of trying to get to. um and Iran kind of tried to get to that point, and we did see like a breaking of the agreement where it's like you only need 10% enrichment to really provide energy. We've never seen a country in the entire world that has approached that 40% threshold of enrichment without making a nuclear weapon. It's never happened. And do we really trust that Iran's going to hit the 40% threshold that you need to make a nuclear weapon and not make nuclear weapons? And is that a threat to us now? Maybe not. Is that a threat to us in 10 years? Maybe. Is it a threat to us in 30 years? Definitely. Where along that lines do you take out the threat?
What I've been seeing is apparently they have a stockpile or something of 450 kilograms of some type of uranium,
Yeah, that we
enriched
gave them?
uranium,
That
maybe
we gave them?
that we gave them.
Yes, that was all done under Hillary Clinton. We gave them tons of money to
Obama.
build up. Yeah, but what Obama and Hillary.
I know we lifted
Yep.
sanctions on them, and we gave
Mhm.
them
Pallets of cash.
pallets of their money back to them that they then turned around and used to sponsor terrorism,
Mm.
and yeah, so. And that's the thing. It's like everybody's like, well, diplomacy this, diplomacy that. It's like we've tried diplomacy with these people. It doesn't work. It
Mhm.
doesn't work because they
Well,
are a theocracy. They
well, and
are in furtherance of their religion.
that kind of highlights a point that we had talked about before we had clicked the record button, where we talked about the cohesion of peoples.
Mm.
And you'd brought up Rome and things like that, where you're kind of at that collapse point. And this is where I'd kind of brought up that, like, the furtherance of liberalism past duty is really what causes the denigration of societies. Um, because, not everything is equal, whereas we are not with equal footing, either morally or justificational wise, with every other country, because we all value things just a little bit different. Whereas in their morals say it's okay to do this thing that we see as absolutely atrocious. These things are considered, they're equal. They're actually equal based on the societal group think. And these things are incompatible with each other, which means that eventually you're going to get to a tipping point. You're going to get to a head-to-head conflict when you're seeing a threat arise, because it's like, are we going to allow this system of morals that is completely atrocious to what we believe really get a foothold? Whereas in China doesn't even believe that, like, the way that Iran runs itself is moral, and won't even allow this kind of think in their own country, yet they're willing to give them money. And that's where we kind of play that moral game. Whereas we on a different footing would, which is why you see that complaint where it's like, well, we gave them pallets of cash. Well, that's no different than yeah, we probably never should have done that. And that's where we play that moral footing game.
Well, you can go back and find the video of Marco Rubio talking in 2015, talking about basically laying out the entire set of events that occurred before they even occurred, because it was on the vote of lifting the sanctions on Iran and giving them the cash and all that stuff, and he basically laid out what he thought would happen if we did that, and everything happened. Now, my question to you is, how much of the history since the 1950s of Iran have you looked in, like, our involvement with them since then, have you looked into? Because I've heard people talk about how in 1953, like, the CIA went in there and they had a democracy, and and for some reason we caused chaos within their country. Chaos went on for almost 2 decades until eventually they had a revolution, and then you get the Ayatollah in '79. So the question is like, would they have always come to this point, or was it because of our involvement that they got to this point? And how much of that matters?
Well, I mean, it really just depends, because it's like, look at how the rest of the region has fallen to a theocratic power. When you're talking about the movement of jihad and how it has even kind of gotten its way and footholds into a Western society, I think that was always kind of doomed to happen, especially when you have a democracy, which was part of some of this worry. And it's like, we see the uprisings of something that is absolutely against the ideals that we kind of uphold. And you could try to prescribe whatever you want to this thing, but that's where problems arise. Where it's
But
like,
this was
yes,
like
we
it
accelerated.
ultimately an anti-American movement because of our involvement
Hmm.
over there.
Yes, and I mean, that's happened plenty of times.
And when they say death to America, they mean death to the government, to
Hmm.
the idea of America, not necessarily its people, but just the ideals, I guess.
But at the same time, would it have gotten there even if we had done nothing and we had just allowed something like the Ayatollah to form naturally? Probably,
But how do
because
we
they
know that
call
that would have
Western
formed naturally?
society, but because that's been what's happening. If you look at the region, if you look at Africa, same thing. Whereas it's like you see this happening in Africa, and we've been pretty hands off with Africa. We've been extremely hands off with Africa,
Yeah.
even though they are the most mineral rich country in the world. And that's just because it's a whole lot harder to actually manage these things, the footholds needed within. You've seen Europe try to do the same thing. They're pretty hands off with them now, too. And with hands off, you've seen the same kind of movement that has happened in the Middle East also happening there. You've giant movement towards that more theocratic Muslim state, which is kind of the antithesis to a Western ideals. And it's even getting a foothold in the West. So, like, at what point are you like, nope, we're not going to play this game anymore?
And this is why when you go back and you look at the history, the geopolitical history, and how things have played out over time, and it's kind of crazy when you see like the different factions fighting against each other, and the results that
Mhm.
came from those. It's fascinating, to be honest, and it's all ugly, but it's how we got to where we are today, and it's how we continue to be and solve things. So you just reach a certain point, like you're saying. Once things spread so much, it's just kind of like, all right, we got to tamp this down. We got to tamp it out. We got to stamp it out. We can't let this continue, because if you let it continue, it is a detriment to our very own values. And there is no. You have so many people. I wouldn't call them liberals. I would call them leftist. Is what I call them. and and because they think that these people, that just because they're humans, that they think the same, or they believe in the same things that we do, is because they don't like to die or something, or they have their own families and stuff like that. It's like, okay, that's all fine, but when I can love my daughter, but I'm not gonna say that it's okay for me to marry my daughter or do something else that like they believe. There's just different things that it's just like there's no, they're completely different, man. Like from our values, they're completely different, and it's
Yeah.
not something that we actually hold true, or that we believe in. And you have to fight for what you believe in,
Well,
and
and
you
I
don't
think
want a world that has those values.
I think the wildest part is how we've really separated liberalism from Christianity. And I think that's been one of the bigger problems, because liberalism was born from Christianity. You don't have liberalism if there's no Christianity. I don't think you really do.
Was John Locke a Christian?
Yes. Most of those great philosophers that founded all of this, you don't have America without Christianity.
Yeah, they are pretty much. I mean,
All of those
yeah.
ideas were born from the Christian school of thought. And to
Hmm.
say it was a different Christianity at the time, of course, but to say that we don't have our problems, we do. Like, the Christian school of thought has also caused its problems. We've also, like,
Mm.
gone on crusades. We have caused mass death as well.
I
Um,
would say, those weren't Christian actions whatsoever. I think they were
in
very much
today,
not Christian. Not No,
in
back then too. The
I
Christian
mean,
Crusades. No.
if you go by today's, whereas in like uh some of it, where it was like you are supposed to spread Christianity. uh
Hmm.
Part of that was, we're spreading Christianity. uh
But that was through force, which is not what the Bible says to do. It doesn't say to force it. Yes, you want to spread it, but that doesn't mean you try to force it.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible doesn't say force it. It says you have a duty to try and spread it, but it doesn't say you have a duty to force it on others. People believe what they want to believe. It is your duty to try and persuade them. Yes, it is not your duty to force it on them.
Well, and it's like you really got to look at the times. Whereas like that's kind of how things went, you know. Whereas in like that's where like it the force doctrine, where you you kind of back up your moral belief system with force. That's how we still operate today. There is no, we haven't figured out a way to operate a society that isn't completely backed up by force. There's no way to do it. So, like, yes, part of this was in this furtherance of Christianity, but part of it is also just human nature.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in like you can prescribe the morality to it post hoc, but at the time when you're talking about the same kind of threats that we're talking about now, whereas like it was deemed acceptable or righteous or in furtherance to the long game, that which was the spreading of Christian morality. We failed to kind of spread that one that way, and that just is what it is, you know. Like history is not perfect. History is very bloody, and I think we spend too much time really prescribing some arbitrary based morality to it, when if you looked at it from the lens that we're fighting with now, they'd be like, yeah, that's completely justified because that's how we operate. Whereas if you don't believe in this thing, it is absolutely just to take that person's slave and force them or murder them. And it's like we're not playing on even footing.
Mm-hmm.
Which I do think is partially a detriment to our moral system, because then you create enemies and all of that. You know, shine is the brightest candle type thing. And
Never heard that phrase.
So like be the light that shines in the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't think when you're playing in a world that isn't always playing by those rules, that you can always play by those rules too.
The question is, do we believe that our current actions and what has transpired since the beginning of this war with Iran, that this will lead to the furtherance of our ideals and not harm them, harm the progress or the spreading of our ideals? Or is it simply we're just trying to mitigate, and we're just going to mitigate as much as we can, and then we're just going to back off and then let them try to build up again and see what happens. Go after them again. We're going to build up ourselves. We're going to learn from it, and we're going to let them work. All right, go ahead. Now try your stuff again. I don't know.
I think the most successful operation we've kind of had was more of like the Syrian operation, where minimal loss on the American side. You've kind of neutralized the threat, and you kind of were able to move on extremely quickly.
We're
I
still
think
in
that-
Syria.
yeah, but minimal loss of life to Americans. Things have kind of moved on from a hot conflict.
Aren't they in the middle of a civil war right now?
Not with us being a participant. Like
No.
we're not. That's what I'm saying. It's like w- it's that's what I'm saying. It's a playbook. Whereas,
Mm.
like, we're kind of trying to build a civil war in Iran right now. Whereas, like, we've talked to the Kurds, we've talked to Turkmenistan. It's like, hey, you guys have a lot of citizens here. Do you guys want to kind of like take this thing over so that we can have more of like a progressive society thing, something that's compatible with most of the world? And that's like, I think this is like the game that a lot of people don't really take into account. Whereas, like, things aren't always going to be perfect in the means that you use, but is the end result better than if you had just been hands off? Could less people die because we intervened, or are more people going to die because we intervened? I think it's way too early to tell. But if you take into account the death toll in Iran before, how it's, treated its own citizens, I think it's highly likely that, as America, that we don't kill as many Iranians as Iran has killed.
Potentially. What do you think about this? Well, I guess you would say, um, do you think Israel is in it for the same reasons we are? Or do you think it is what a theory out there is that they just lead us around because it's all in furtherance of a theological reasons.
I think there's multiple answers, and that's where it gets kind of tricky. Is like you can't just prescribe one answer to everything. It's like, oh well, boom, it was the Zionists. They did this. It's like to act like we have zero interest in Iran at all when they're selling 80% of the oil that China buys is ludicrous.
Mm-hmm.
China gets 80% of their oil from Iran, and you're going to tell me that we have zero interest in maybe putting a halt to that, especially after we just put a halt to China buying 800 billion barrels of oil in Venezuela. I would say that, you'd kind of be smoking something a little funky if you think that we have zero interest in that. Do our interests sometimes align with Israel's? Probably. Are they for different reasons? I would say yes, depending on who you're talking to. Because there's groups that think a little bit differently there, and there's groups that are more of your religious fanatical, the same way that the people they're fighting are more religious fanaticals. And you kind of have to balance these all out. And that's the part I think a lot of people are really unable to do, where there has to be one answer. Actually, there doesn't. This isn't like math. It's not 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's actually that's
It's actually a
17.
cookie.
Yeah.
It's a cookie. It's like this is the Iran war, and this is all objectives within that. Different things that we want out of it.
Mhm.
It's not just this one thing. It's not only to distract from the Epstein files, but that is part of it. No.
No, I would say that that's a very nice benefit to the whole situation.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't the intentional. It was like, well, let's distract from Epstein. Boom, bomb that place. I was like,
Yeah.
it's an unintended consequence that we also happen to be aligned with these other things all at the same time, that we are clearly trying to empire build against China right now.
No, no, BC. Look, bro. Look, I'm telling you. It's because Israel has blackmail on Trump, and that's the only reason Trump did it.
I mean, that could also be one of the things, like, like I said, it's multifaceted. But like, to also ignore the fact that we have clear objectives that we've been doing this entire administration: Venezuela, keeping China at bay, Iran,
Greenland.
keeping China at bay, Greenland, keeping China at bay, keeping Russia at bay, Taiwan, keeping China at bay. To act like we're not in a geopolitical Cold War with China right now is just like, okay, I don't see anything that's going on.
Well, and I think a lot of it is because, and you see it, there's there's a lot of inconsistent messaging from the administration,
Well,
and
surprise, surprise, Trump opens his mouth and you don't know whether he put another foot in there or took one of them out to spit some nonsense.
well, I mean, but it's not just Trump, right? You know, it's Trump,
Mm,
it's Rubio, it's Hegseth. I mean, it's on down the line. There's just no consistency,
mhm,
and I think a lot of that is because exactly what we're talking about. We're hitting many different objectives,
mhm,
but the thing is, the question is why there's the there's one thing that they're not saying, which is typically the core thing, which is fight against China. It's a cold war against China,
mhm,
and because that is the all-encompassing thing, and not just China necessarily, but China's ideals versus our ideals, and that's just kind of brings this whole topic back together, and it's just yeah, that's what it's actually about. And like, it's not that nobody's talking about it, it's just that the admin's not talking about it.
I think
And
it's taken for granted at this point, where it's like, hey, we're in a cold conflict with China. The same way that we spent the 50s, the 60s, the 70s in a cold conflict with Russia,
Russia.
like we're doing the same thing here. We kind of put Russia on the back burner, and we built up a secondary adversary, and now we're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have built up China as an opposition to Russia, and now we're going to deal with this conflict. And instead of going hot conflict with China, the same way that we never wanted to go hot conflict with the USSR, and instead we had these micro skirmishes all throughout everything, we did
Hmm.
all of this with Russia in the Middle East too, when they
Hmm.
were trying to do the exact same stuff that China's doing.
Hmm.
So, like, I think a lot of people are just like, they kind of forget some of these things.
Well, they just don't know their history.
There's that too.
And they're just, or they focus on singular events like the CIA going into Iran and, disrupting their society and making them get to a point of revolution and installation of Ayatollah. Okay, whatever. What happened before 53 though? What happened before that?
Mhm.
Like, history is history. It's all different kinds of events, you know? It's not just this one singular event. You can't judge you can't say, there's a lot of things. You could say that we started the war when we sent the CIA in to Iran. It's like, I mean, I guess, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, that means we've been in a war since, and guess what? We got to win it because that's what you do. You're supposed to win a war. Um, you can't just look at the one singular event because a lot of things could have happened since then that maybe should have happened. Maybe they shouldn't have continued to be a theological autocracy. Maybe that's something that they should have avoided or moved away from. Maybe they shouldn't have oppressed their women in their society. Maybe that's something they shouldn't have done to make us think that, hey, maybe they don't fit with modern society. Maybe we need to blow them up. Maybe they shouldn't have tried to get a nuclear weapon. And now you have this thing going around saying that they didn't believe in nuclear weapons because it's against their religion or something. The Ayatollah said this. And I'm just like, I mean, that's nice propaganda, but
The amount of
um,
propaganda I've seen being spouted online.
bro,
I got into it with Ian Carroll on X I posted a picture of him drooling over some Iranian propaganda that was handed to him by the Ayatollah leader, because he literally just spouted off the first day where it was like, "Oh yeah, yep, we bombed a girls' school and we
Mm.
just blew up all of their desalination plant." Well, it's like,
Hmm.
well, 4 days later, the IRGC came out and was like, "Yep, that was one of our own missiles that accidentally blew up the girls' school." Oh, nice, bro. But you spent 4 days spouting off Iranian propaganda when the BBC and the non-American news source was like, "We don't know anything about this yet. It is unconfirmed. We can't tell who did anything. Yeah, it's just the most plausible scenario is that America, a Western country who, for the most part, idealizes Western ideals and people being equal and people being free, is going to just blow up children." Yeah, that makes a ton, and it's been crazy online, and it's been
I mean, and like, uh, let's do the whole how do I put it? A thought experiment. Let's just do a thought experiment. What if would it be our fault since we started the bombing? Would it be our fault if an interceptor just like hit a missile and it happened to hit a girls' school? Like, is that our fault because we started the war, or is that collateral damage?
see, and I wouldn't prescribe fault to either side. Whereas, like,
Hmm.
this is the natural order of the escalation, and sometimes some bad things happen. There's collateral damage. People that would normally be alive are not,
It is
and
so
it's just an
hard, difficult for
Mhm.
people to square that circle.
it's an unintended consequence. And
Mm.
yes, it absolutely terrible that it happened. Those people should still be alive. But at the same time, when you're having a hot conflict, there's going to be some unintended consequences that nobody is going to want to see. And we're going to be at fault for some of them, and they're going to be at fault for some of them. And that just, it's not the pretty truth of it. And it's hard to be like, okay, well, we're bad, they're bad, we're bad, they're bad. Like, that gets us nowhere.
Mm.
And it wastes time to dissect every single problem and be like, oh, well, we're the bad guy there, they're the bad guy there, we're the bad. Like, is this in the furtherance of the end goal? Are we not necessarily establishing a democracy, but are we keeping China at bay? Are we trying to also open up this country to be allowed to taken back over by the people that had
And see, a lot
originally
of people would
wanted
say that this makes
democracy?
other countries not trust us and not like us, and that would be at the detriment of our goals.
I mean, a lot of the countries that is going to make a not like us and not work with us already don't like us and don't want to work with us. So what's the difference? Like, oh no, these countries that already didn't like us and were already saying death to America because we're the Western,
No,
we're
not
Western.
them. Our own allies,
I mean,
like condemning our actions.
mm, I mean, eventually
I
they
don't think
could,
I've seen
but
it.
like,
I think maybe the French did. I
oh,
think it's mostly.
French. I'm gonna take full insult by what France says right now when they've got a whole other list of problems that they should be dealing with.
Mm.
Counter this, counter that. Freedom's more than tit for tat. Words can build or words can break. Speak the truth for all our sake. A that feeds can also bind, but peace can free a restless mind.